Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Prodigal Son. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, that cold open. Come on, dude. Because I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, Martin's doing his routine thing, and they're playing Survivor by Destiny's Child on top of it. I'm like, why is this the best cold opening ever? I'm like, I just love it. It's just like him, this song going on, especially because it's at the chorus and he's just doing his stretches and the exercise, and I love it. Then we have him in his therapy session. He's talking about how good things have kind of been and stuff like that. But I also love that it's like, oh, you've kind of talked long enough. Now it's Jerry's turn. And then you have Jerry gloating about, him getting out and just how excited he is. And it's just like everyone's just like clenching their fists, like super pissed at him because it's like, he's just like, oh, he's like, yeah, talking about the terrible thing about being locked up in here. Oh, this is no way to live. It's like this is one of those situations they're like, read the damn room, Jerry. It's like, maybe it wouldn't have been well, at first with the way that it was set up, it almost seemed like maybe one of the people in the room killed him because he was gloating about getting out while they were still stuck in there. But then he also brought up the conversation. He was like, oh yeah, it's like, now I'm on the right medication. And the doc is like, oh, the therapist dude is kind of like, oh yeah, I'd like to think my therapy helped out too. He's like, right. I was like, why isn't Martin getting any credit? I was like, no, because he's the one that suggested he's the reason that they were able to kind of shift how Jerry was treated. But even I was like, we also never got a conclusion to how did you just skirt around the fact is that you found it out because you were trying to kill him? But I guess he was like, no, because I knew what was happening, and I just, I as a professional, I knew exactly what was going down. So it's like, granted, yeah, you were trying to kill him, but I guess by skirting around it, by being like, I was trying to save him. I was doing my Hippocratic oath as a doctor, even though I'm a serial killer. I think maybe he probably was able to skirt around it like that, because we never found out how you're just nonchalant about oh yeah, he tried to kill his new roomie, regardless. But I love that. I'm like, oh, he's still kind of well, he's not getting any credit for helping Jerry. And I love that he's outside playing basketball. He's like, yeah. He's like, it's my form is a little off. And Mr. David, it's like, there's a lot more to that. And then Jerry goes splat. He goes, oh no, not Jerry. I'm like, I couldn't help but laugh because I was like, the sarcasm and just oh no, not Jerry. I loved the delivery of it. It was amazing. But I love how this case, it's one thing after another. You have Gil there, and then all of a sudden, it's like, we have an eyewitness. It's like, good. He's over there. And it's like, hey, Lieutenant Arroyo. And he's just like, Then Adresa is like, oh my God, it is him, isn't it? That's Dr. Whitley. And she's like, I'm going to play it cool. And Gil's looking at her like, what do you mean you're going to play it cool? And it's like, afternoon, doctor. And then they're having a little back and forth, and it's just once again, I love and adore Adresa so much, just the back and forth between them. And they're like, oh, did you read that latest article in Lance? It's like, oh my God, yes. And it's just yeah, it was so shocking, I almost spilled my what she was drinking, and they're laughing, ha 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 ha. And Gil's just like, he's like, he killed 23 people. And then Adresa stops. She's like, copy that. It's like, you were getting a little too friendly, a little too formal with them. But to be fair, I guess it's also just because it's, Adresa's the weirdo that she is. But also, a part of me almost wonders, is she a little more lax around him just because she spends so much time around Malcolm? But I think it's also just, she I think that's why her and Malcolm kind of have a bit of a kinship, because they're both kind of weirdos in their own right, too. But I love that, obviously, there's a whole thing with Malcolm and his mom where it's like, oh, the rug and everything. It's like, oh yeah, there was a 2007 bottle of wine we spilled. It was a whole thing. And I guess he came up with I was wondering I guess he was wondering if it ever came up, he'd be prepared for it. It almost sounded like he came up with it on the spot then, but maybe it's just he was in panic mode, so it sounded like it, but he had probably already rehearsed. I guess he was just almost hoping well, nothing's come up before now, so maybe mom won't bring it. And it's like, no, his mom brought it up. And then he brings it up to Ainsley when he sees her later, you need to be prepared. Mom might start asking questions. She's like, actually, I don't remember what really went down and stuff like that. And it's like, no, your mind's trying to protect you, so it's good. I think that's coming from the place of Malcolm knowing first and foremost what that means, because for him, it's he went digging up a lot of those memories about the woman from the trunk. Granted, it worked out. Well, it didn't even work out because you can make, because of the whole Eve thing, it definitely didn't work out. But there was at least, I think, some closure in that regard. But I think probably for Malcolm, it's like, I should have left those doors closed. I mean, granted, that door was peeking open already, but it's like he wants to prevent Ainsley from even going down that route. Just doesn't want that to potentially change her. So she's like, all right, I need to, talk to Dad. It's like, no, you're not going to talk to Dad. All right, fine. Oh, that's a new case? Let me get on it. It's like, fine. But if you get on this new case, you have to promise me you're going to forget about what happened that night and you're not going to talk to Dad. Fine. Answer it. Boom. Gail's like, there's been a murder at Claremont and your dad is the witness. And Ainsley's like, yeah. And she's so excited. I was like, that is just the both most perfect and shittiest time. And the moment Malcolm said that, it's like, oh, you can't, don't ask about that night and don't talk to Dad. The moment he said that, I was like, oh boy, you should have brought that up after you talked to Gil. But I was like, and she's like, yeah, come on, are you coming? And he's drinking, and she's like, go ahead, chug it, okay, come on, attaboy, let's go. So I was like, that sucks. And obviously you have Martin so excited about this because he even brought it up to Gil, like, hey, I'm ready to be part of the investigation. He's like, oh, I even got some suspects. It's like, this doesn't look like a suicide. This looks like this could have been murder, and so on and so forth. He wants to be a part of the investigation. It's like, I really won't help out too much unless I get to be part of the investigation. And then he's even like, he's like, yeah, and like, because him being the little like spiteful person that he is, bringing up Gil, like, oh, he's like, I did kind of, arresting me did kind of make your career. You've been there for my son and my wife. And Gil was about to walk away, but then like Malcolm stopped and was like, come on. And so Malcolm kind of gives Gil the look because Gil's like, what? No, he's not working. Fine. So that's a new partnership. And it's like, well, here are suspects. Therapy session's about to go down. So Malcolm can sit in and, do his profiler thing. And it's like, for him, it's because the title for this episode is Take Your Son to Work Day, right? Or Dad to Work Day, I think it's Take Your Dad to Work Day. Sorry, I'm blanking, but I love that title immediately, along with just the confines of the episode. But obviously during the session and stuff like that, some of them wanted to do Hector. He's like, you're Malcolm, right? Yeah, you're the one that got fired from the FBI. You sawed off that dude's hand. I was like, all right, that takes me back to episode 1. You smashed your hand because obviously to get out of those cuffs. And it's like, oh, and I love Friar Pete leaning over. He's like, does he have a hand thing? And it's like, I just love that whole situation because it's almost like, oh, it's hands his thing, And then Hector being like, dude, you might be crazy to me. He's like, Hector, I don't think that's possible, like, because he had gutted someone with a fire poker. And so I was like, oh. But obviously, like, the back and forth, like, the whole conversation got Malcolm heated because, like, the whole thing, because at first it's like, oh man, turning in your dad, oh, that's kind of messed up. I don't think I'd be able to do it. That must have messed you up. And he was like, yes, it did. Like, it's like, you must have hated your dad. It's like, no, I actually loved him. I wanted to be everything like him. I wanted to spend so much time with him until I found out my dad, found a woman in the suitcase and found out that my dad's actually a serial killer. That it's like, oh, we should probably be getting back to the Jerry. Also, focus on the positive, son. But it's like, you destroyed me, like, Dad, like, and he wants me to be like him, but it's like, no, you destroyed me. And everyone in the room is like, whoa, because there was a whole conversation about like, oh, how's everyone's relationship with you? And he was like, they respect me. It's like, they hate you, don't they? He's like, yep, definitely. And I think in that moment they were just like, whoa, like hearing like Malcolm spurred all that. I think it's kind of like, well, they don't really like Martin that much to see how much his son dislikes him, and just I think that passion is kind of what made them open up too. Hector was like, no, it's okay, and they talk a little bit about, Jerry, because it's like, he shouldn't have been, it's like, you're asking the wrong question. How did Jerry even get to the rooftop? You need a card. There's only one card that opens everything, and it's like a gold card. And then like, Martin looks at Pete and was like, wait, a gold card? Because this is the first time he's heard of it. He knew about the 3 different cards. He didn't know there was like a one all-in-one card, the gold card. And then I love that the moment that happened, then the narrative starts switching to the therapist dude being like, what color card do you have? And I love that, like, was it Bert, Pete, and Hector all turned towards him? It's like the entire session group turns to look at him like, oh, like, you look like a suspect now. It's like, sure, Doc, of course that's ridiculous, but what color card do you have? And he has gold, and then Bert shows up. It's like, you killed him, you killed Jerry, and beats the crap out of him, so he gets arrested later on. At the same time, Ainsley had talked to her mom, well, a little beforehand, Ainsley had talked to her mom about the whole, like, run into her, and her mom had showed her the carpet, and that triggered something. And, it's like, oh yeah, they spilled the 2007 bottle. The fact that what was really suspicious, though, was like her mom being like, what bottle was it again? It's like, you can tell her mom went into overdrive, but like, she is super suspicious about, like, there's definitely something going on here. Like, I guess because she caught Malcolm's response and she wanted to see what Ainsley would have to say. And then, like, in that moment, the Ainsley giving that exact same response, she still had that look on her face like, curious or uncurious. It's like, oh, I guess I got the response I wanted, but still, it didn't sit right with her. Speaking of that, I think Martin, that really caught me by surprise when she called him up and it was like, yeah, it's like, why would they know this, remember that specific thing? If it was just kind of like a random bottle, why would you know the specifics of it? So it's like she felt like they were lying to her. It's like, go ahead, ask the question you want to ask. And she's nervous about it. And it's just like, that was the same night Nicholas Endicott disappeared. And it's like, go ahead. But that doesn't sound like a question. It's like, she's like, I can't. You want to ask the question whether or not our kids murdered him. And then it's like, well. And then he was just playing along. And then he's like, do you know how ridiculous he sounds? It's almost like you're saying our children rolled him up in a rug and then shipped him off to some. And then that moment, I was like, why did you add that little detail? She was bringing up the rug. She didn't mention a potential, like, I guess the justification could be like, oh, I picked some random location. But it's like, why that location specifically? I guess it's just kind of like, oh, I guess he could have said, oh, I've sent the body to the Caribbean or something like that. But it's like, why would you even joke about a location? To me, I feel like that's what caught Jessica's attention. She doesn't say it later on, but I'm like, that's such a specific place. But then he also says a line of like, I get it. It's like sometimes you're worried that maybe the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, and that line made Jessica pause. And it's like, I think Martin tried to be like all sly and with it, I think is what kind of triggered Jessica to like flip out and worry even more. Which is funny, the moment he hangs up with her, Ainsley comes into the room because Ainsley's bringing up, and Malcolm's like, oh, I remember something. He's like, yeah, you had blood all over you because you were trying to save Endicott, so that's how you got blood all over you. She's like, yeah, but what's going on? Like, because she doesn't have anyone she could talk to about it. Only people who know the truth is her and their dad. Is Malcolm and her dad. So it's like, let me talk to one of you. It's like, but Malcolm doesn't want to bring up anything, doesn't want to talk about it too much because it's like, if they start talking, it's going to start triggering more. He even brings it up to his dad. It's like, she's remembering. It's like, what are you going to do about that? So at the same time with all of that, Ainsley talks to her dad while Malcolm is showing off a little bit in front of Danny when it's like revealed like, oh, there's a women's ward, which I was like, oh, we haven't even touched on that. And it's like, all right, there's some potential suspects because the library is where he was killed, and we can see the marks from the wall when he got pushed. But and basically there's a number of suspects. And it's like, oh, Jerry must have had a girlfriend, and he's like working his way down the list. And then Danny's like, really? Like, oh, so she's like, really? You only got it down to these two? It's like, oh, I would have expected you. He's like, no, don't. There's also the fact that Jerry kept mentioning something about lobster, but it's like, why would he know something about, what would be the fascination with lobster unless it came from the significant other? And it's like, well, it turns out one of them, Rhonda, is from Maine. And he goes, and she's like, really? You got all that? You found out you got a suspect from lobster? And he was like, honestly, I could have gone about it this way, but where would have been fun in that? And I like the smile across Danny's face, I love their chemistry and their back and forth. But I'm thinking about it too much, but I thought it was interesting because Rhonda's last name is Young, which I thought was interesting. Like I said, I'm getting too caught up in it because it makes me think of Bellamy Young, the actress who plays Jessica. It just made me think of that. I was like, oh, it's just interesting. There's a Young and a Young. I'm thinking too much about it. But regardless, Rhonda kind of points everything towards Martin about, because like, oh, he was trying to get Jerry to help him escape and everything. And it's like, what? And now it's like, Malcolm's doing whatever he can to keep Ainsley away from the dad, but she's like, I don't know which one of you is lying to me because neither one of you will tell me the truth for whatever reason, And Martin's not helping, but he's not hurting the situation either because he's being like almost looking at Malcolm's like, the ball's in your corner, son. Like, what are you gonna do about this? and he confronts his dad about like, yeah, you are trying to escape this place and stuff like that. And then like Martin kind of went off on him because it's like, oh, you weren't lying. Like that whole thing, that performance at therapy wasn't just a performance. That's really how you feel. But then he kind of snaps. It's like, if you really think of me, the cold-blooded psychopath that I am, I wouldn't love you. I hate you because you not only, you destroyed my life, you destroyed Ainsley, and you destroyed your mother, and you destroyed her. I'm assuming he was referring to Ainsley. But then he kind of snaps back and it's like, but that's not me. But I'm like, that in some part makes you wonder, like, was that a real performance? Or was there some part of him that has those conflicted feelings of, like, he loves Malcolm, but it's also like, yeah, you kind of have destroyed everything because I wasn't there in you guys' lives to kind of keep everything balanced. You and Ainsley kind of been messed up, and so has Jessica, But then, at the end of the day, it's like, why would Rhonda, want to frame you? But it's like, because Jerry was leaving her. And we find out, like, she has explosive rage as she was beating the shit out of Andre, the guard. I was almost at first suspecting him because it's like, oh, well, he's a guard and everything else. I was wondering if there was some correlation there, but no. She manages to get out. She's coming for Martin. And ends up taking him to the basement. And he's like, oh, this is actually a good place for a murder. He's like, he made a comparison of like, once you find your place, you want to go back over and over again. It's like finding a good restaurant. And Malcolm's like, okay, shut up. So at the same time, there's that thing at the end where it's like, hey, she's shocking your son and potentially about to bash his head in with a wrench. But it's like Martin's kind of deciding what he's going to do, whether he's going to escape or not, because, hey, got the bolt cutters, cut off his cuffs, the exit's right there. Oh, there's also the gold card. Are you going to do it? Because it's like, well, my son's not dead. And especially later on when Danny shows up and he's probably trying to decide, he's walking up behind her, it's like, what is he going to do? But luckily they work together, and I love that whole thing. It's like, yeah, me, my son, and my new friend Danny, and she's just like, ugh. And he's like, and she was like, don't ever put your hands on me again or I will shoot you. He's like, noted. And he's like, well, this has been the greatest day ever, but it got even better because of my new friend Danny. I was like, don't be on a first name basis with me, dude. But I also love the whole thing of him being like, wait, and here comes the best part. Rhonda, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. And she was like, don't do that. Stop talking. He was like, okay. I love that so much. Because I love that he's getting closer to the people Malcolm works with. Luckily, JT wasn't there. That would have just been even more. I think, didn't they have moments in season 1 where he was like, oh, no, it was during the voice. He was like, oh, you must be JT. Oh, is that Danny's voice? Like, I remember that conversation. It's like, yeah, and that made JT a little unnerved because it's like, oh, we're on a first name basis. Oh, no. I don't want to be on first name basis with a serial killer with 23 bodies on him. But also, because like I said, there was a whole Idrissa thing where it's like Martin was on speakerphone because Idrissa needed his help. Which I want to talk about that moment where it's just kind of like Malcolm was setting up his profile for the potential killer, and Idrissa was like, with what he had set up, it's like, the explosive rage of seeing someone kind of like, kind of happier than you and stuff like that. And Idrissa's like, she's like, I get it. Recently, a situation where like basically someone she knows is getting married. And she's like, I get it. You're happy. You've seen Turtles. And yes, you're marrying my ex-boyfriend from high school. And then they're kind of looking at Idrissa, and she's like, I've seen plenty of Turtles. It was once again, just the cutest thing ever. But interesting thing to remember, though, even though the gold card got taken from Martin, that would have been the best result for him, but he still has the green and red card. Wasn't it the green card? Yeah, he has 2 of the 3 cards needed, whatever the colors were. I know one of them was red, but I think wasn't the other one green. It might have been, whatever the case may be. He has 2 of the 3 cards, so that's still a potential avenue for him to get out. So that way, that opportunity hasn't completely disappeared. So I'm curious what the therapy session is going to be like now, too, considering it's like, well, their therapist gave him the card. So, yeah, you didn't kill him, but you were being a little irresponsible. because, for Jerry to be like, hey, he cured me so that great opportunities could come the doctor's way. And it's like, oh, he could show that my therapy actually works, yada, yada, yada. He's like, I could have gotten some deals out of it eventually. So it's like, I don't know if they're going to let him back at a prison. Maybe. I don't know. It's definitely going to, if they did, it'd make future therapy sessions really interesting. Not unless we do end up getting a new therapist under those sessions. But that's definitely going to be fascinating to see where things kind of go on that front. But then, Malcolm's sitting down with his mom, and his mom's just joking. She's like, oh, like, at one point, I thought you and your sister had killed Nicholas. And you're like, ah, ha, 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 ha. At the same time, Ainsley's reading a book of trying to understand her dad a little bit more. Because, that's a side of herself. She had brought that up in season 1, where that was a side of herself she didn't really get to know their dad. She was locked away. The only one who continued to have, interactions with their dad has been Malcolm, obviously, and even Jess has communicated with him on more times than Ainsley has. So, but Jessica's like, yeah, I was looking for any evidence, this and that, trying to find any opportunity. But she's like, I didn't find any. And he was like, oh, of course you didn't, And then she was like, but then I found this, and it's a book. It's like, you missed a drop. There's a bit of blood on the book. I was like, dude, after everything Malcolm did, he knows crime scenes enough, knew exactly, especially with his dad's help to clean up the crime scene. But that one drop of blood gave him away. So what happened? And he was like, I killed him. She's like, you're lying again. He's like, I'm just trying to protect the family. And then she figures it out. It's like, you didn't do it. Ainsley did. And he was like, you cannot tell her. She doesn't remember anything. If you tell her, I'm afraid we might lose her. He's afraid, all that, who Ainsley is right now may disappear. And the shock of it all. And I think I've talked about this. It might have been in a video. It might have been last season. I think it was definitely in maybe my potential season 2 video, or my thoughts and theories about season 2 of Prodigal Son. I talked about the irony behind it. It might have even been the season finale as well. Regardless, she spent so much time worried and being focused on Malcolm, and she should have been worried about Ainsley. That, to me, the poetic irony behind it. So that was just always, now I think she's kind of realizing that herself, even to the point later on, it's like, that's a lot to process, because as she's thinking about it, obviously she was flashing back to when Martin was arrested, because it's obviously she didn't see the signs with Martin, and now it's almost like it's happening again. I didn't see the signs with Ainsley, and now it's once again, she was so focused on Malcolm, she felt we know that Ainsley was somewhat the quote-unquote most well-adjusted in the family. Not really, considering it's like I said, last season she definitely kind of stepped towards that darkness. You saw those moments of her being she's not the most normal. Considering the circumstances, of course no one in that family is going to be normal. But her mom, she was like, Mom, I kind of had a nightmare. So do you mind if I sleep in here? She's like, sure. And she's watching her. And it reminded me a little bit. I might have even made this reference before. It kind of reminds me of the movie Mr. Brooks. It kind of reminds me of that a little bit. I won't go into spoilers about it if you've never seen the movie. But it seems like what that movie had set up in certain regards, it seems like obviously this show is kind of doing that. It did that, and now it's paying off that development in multiple folds. And now, Jessica's never going to be able to look at her daughter the same way again, because it's knowing God, she killed Nicholas. But not only that, it's now I got to be careful to make sure she doesn't fully remember. And if she does remember, there's a good chance she might end up like her dad, and just all of that being what it is, the issue that it is. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see, where things kind of go on that front. How does she juggle what she knows now? Now there are 3 people that knows the truth, 3 people around Ainsley who know the truth, but she doesn't. But it's also bad because she's starting to read more from her dad's book, because it's I think there's something to it that's she's trying to understanding him, because maybe you can say that was them setting this up that long ago, that her wanting to get to know him is because it's trying to understand a bit of herself. Malcolm does everything he can to deny that part of himself, that part of his dad. Obviously he's had to come to realize yes, that is a part of me, but that doesn't mean I have to let it consume me. Or Ainsley's kind of learning about that, and I think the irony is she's going to embrace it, whereas Malcolm pushes it away. We'll see in the long run what kind of effect this had. I'd even suggested, during my video, or it might even been in the comments, I think, potentially this will put Malcolm and Ainsley on the different sides of things. He might, in the long run, end up having to arrest his sister because she might go full-blown psycho. I mean, especially if this leads to a situation where their dad manages to get out, he might go on a run with Ainsley potentially. I could be reading too much, that's a potential route this show could go. It's really going to be interesting to see where things go now with these developments. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.